I saw Tenet a week ago. Actually, less than a week ago. And my mind was blown. It takes a lot of brain power. And then I'm like, you know what? Let's watch a more straightforward movie. I'm thinking of ending things. This this is even worse. So, hey guys, what's up? It's a culture detective here, investigating your favorite movies, and today I'm going to do a movie review on one of the more anticipated movies of the year, and that would be I'm Thinking of Ending Things. So, I'm Thinking of Ending Things is directed and written by Charlie Kaufman, and it is also adapted from a novel of the same name written by a Canadian known as Ian Reid. And I have been anticipating this movie for quite some while. It's like a zoo outside. Because Charlie Kaufman is extremely talented. He's a big brain writer. He has written amazing movies that are considered classics, such as Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind, Adaptation, one of the most underrated gems, very critically acclaimed, Synecdoche, New York. Earlier, I also reviewed Being John Malkovich, which is this super odd, absurd, and ridiculous uh, acid trip of a comedy movie. And we also have Anna Melissa, which is one of the slow burns of the 2010s, but it still works as something emotionally impactful. And yeah, Charlie Kaufman is the godfather of all existential crises, and he has been writing some of the best screenplays and scripts of cinematic history. Yes. So, of course, I was really, really interested in watching this movie, especially after the incredibly weird and confusing trailer. Now, of course, I have to start the review by talking about the plot of the movie. But this movie is a very special movie. It doesn't exactly have a plot. I mean, in the beginning, it has a very clear premise. We have Lucy, played by Jessie Buckley, whose boyfriend, played by Jesse Plemons, is Jake, and Jake was driving Lucy to his parents' farmhouse in the middle of nowhere in Oklahoma, and they are going to go there and have dinner there. And things just become weirder and weirder and more confusing from there on. This movie is like Darren Aronofsky's mother. This movie is going to be very, very polarizing because it's just unexplainable. It's like one huge fever dream. It's very, I don't even know how to describe it. It also kind of reminds you of Twin Peaks: The Return, which is season 3 of Twin Peaks by David Lynch. You know what I'm talking about. Which is this really weird, experimental, abstract thing where a lot of the scenes don't even have explanations. Weird things just happen. Same goes for I'm Thinking of Ending Things. It's very cerebral, and it's not very plot heavy. It's a huge slow burn. If you dislike movies with a slow pace, you may hate this one because it's very, very slow. It's very, very indulgent. It's very, very patience testing, and it's very confusing. I think at the halfway point of the movie, I already gave up on trying to make sense of everything because this movie is bound to be weird. It's bound to be nonsensical. It's bound to be like a fever dream. There aren't any explanations to any of these plot points, and that's kind of the point. And while you can say, yeah, well, it's kind of gimmicky, kind of pretentious, They're being weird for the sake of being weird. There are a few moments where I thought, yeah, it's a little gimmicky, sure, but at the same time, I feel like there is a deeper meaning behind all this, even though I didn't really understand it at first. Regardless, let's just say that the acting is phenomenal. David Thewlis as Jake's dad, and Toni Collette as Jake's mom are amazing. Both of them are super duper just chaotic and strange and awkward. The interactions between the characters are so awkward and unhinged and uncomfortable, and their performances are easily highlights of the movie for me. I also really like the cinematography of the movie. Apparently, it's the same cinematographer from Ida, and yeah, thus we have the very special aspect ratio, a la The Lighthouse. In fact, a lot of things about this movie also remind me a lot of The Lighthouse, and that um, a good part of the movie also takes place in Jake's house, Jake's parents' farmhouse. And weird things start happening, nothing is making sense. It's almost like The Lighthouse, where two characters, or in this movie, four characters, are trapped in one house and they're all just going insane and doing weird things, and weird things happen. The first 22 minutes of the movie is also one scene, and it's incredibly long and slow paced. And that is the car ride with Jake and Lucy in the car, and they're just chatting, they're just talking to one another, and it's such a long conversation. Um, it's very very indulgent, and the things they talk about range all the way from dumb things like musicals to poems. What's also kind of special about this movie is that it feels like whoever's writing this movie is a person with 1000 IQ, because the characters in this movie use all these complicated huge words. They make references to old music, old poems, old movies. The characters, they talk about these movies in a very meta way. They talk about literature. There are scenes where the characters talk about science and philosophy using very deep, complex words, and it just feels like a very cerebral 1000 IQ experience. And that is the car ride for me. Also, it's very emotionally unstable. One scene, they would be laughing together and having fun, and in another scene, the main female character, Lucy, would be reciting her extremely long and excruciatingly depressing poem about going home. And that scene, I don't know how much time had passed in that scene, but that scene's like 5 minutes long, where she just recites this poem and silently cries, and it's just this really really weird moment. And then they arrived at the house, of course, at the farmhouse, and things just get weirder and weirder and weirder. There's a scene, the dinner scene, and that scene is so frustrating because they were just sitting down and they were just talking and talking and talking, but they didn't eat anything. They didn't at all. So why are the food there? And there was one moment at the very end of that scene. Suddenly, the shot changed from a medium shot to a wide shot, and you see Lucy chugging a glass of wine all of a sudden. It's very jarring. Another thing is that Lucy, the main female character, her occupation changes from time to time. Sometimes she is a painter, sometimes she's a poet. She's said to be studying quantum physics, but she talks about rabies infections, which I don't think is related to quantum physics at all. So it's just really, really, really strange. Another thing would be that the name Lucy changes a lot. Lucy changes to Louisa, Lucia, and towards the end of the movie, Amy. It's a fever dream, really. Aside from that, we also have a scene where Lucy and Jake looks at the photos in the house, and Lucy's like, "Oh, who's that?" And Jake was like, "Oh, that's me." And Lucy's like, "No, that's me." And then things change even crazier. Suddenly, everyone disappeared, and Lucy walked around the house, and people started aging. People started growing old. She's seeing the older versions of Jake's parents, and then suddenly she sees their younger versions, and then sometimes she would see the younger version of Jake's dad and the older version of Jake's mom at the same time in the same space. Jake himself doesn't age. Jake stays the same all the time. And what's very confusing is that Jake and Lucy, they're not like, oh my god, what's going on? They just go along with these events. And throughout the entire first hour of the movie, Lucy always says, okay, I've got to go home. I've got to go home because I have to write this paper that's due tomorrow. I've got to go home, and it's snowing outside. It's a blizzard outside. So Jake's like, don't worry. We've got chains. We've got chains. And so finally they decided to leave the farmhouse and head home. And then while going home, they suddenly decided to stop for a burr, whatever a burr is. That scene's probably one of my favorite scenes in the entire movie because it's so odd. It's almost Lynchian, where in the middle of nowhere there's this place called Tulsi Town where they can serve you ice cream. And it's already weird eating ice cream in the middle of a blizzard while you're trying to hurry home to do a paper that's due tomorrow. But also the people who's working in that Tulsi town, there were two girls and they were both pretty blondes and they were being very flirtatious and they feel dangerous. And then there's this other girl who acts really strange and awkward. She has rashes on her arms and she's like, you don't have to go. And Lucy's like, go? Go where? Forward in time. And you're thinking, wait, is this movie somehow related to time travel? No? What's going on? Everything's getting to be weirder and weirder and weirder and weirder. And also we have this, we occasionally in the movie, we would get these very jarring intercuts to this old janitor working in a school, scrubbing the floor, cleaning everything. And in fact, the girls the janitor sees in the school are the girls who are working in Tulsi Town. It's almost like everything is a part of his imagination, which is one piece of the evidence, of course. But also, at one point, the janitor sat down, ate a sandwich while watching a movie. And there's this really strange scene where the entire shot is just janitor's back, and in front of him, another screen, and it's playing another movie with a normal aspect ratio, where this woman and this guy work at a restaurant, and this woman's like a waitress, and this old guy was like, oh, which burger would you recommend me? The Santa Fe burger or the Nachi burger? And suddenly the guy was like, oh, she's a vegan, she's not a waitress, I love you. And then the woman got fired, and they sat on the side of the road, and the woman's like, idiot, directed by Robert Zemeckis. That scene was hilarious, but even stranger because in the movie, during the dinner scene, right, Lucy explained that she met Jake because of a trivia night in a club, or something, or in a bar or something. And then sometime after, they explained how they met again, and that is Lucy is actually a waitress, and Jake was actually the guy ordering the burger, Santa Fe burger. It's getting weirder and weirder and weirder. Towards the end, they sort of go to a school, a high school in the middle of nowhere, and it gets weirder and weirder and weirder. Jake disappears. Lucy decides to follow him into the school, and the school was like one big fever dream. It was supposed to be nighttime, but there were shots in the movie in that scene that feels like it's a daytime. And it's just, I don't want to spoil the ending, but at one point people started dancing, and the dance became sort of an interpretive dance. And then afterwards, there's a musical number performed by Jesse Plemons himself. And then the movie ends. There isn't supposed to be any explanation to anything. It's just how it is. And of course, there's also an ending, but I'm not going to spoil that part. That part is a little bit more depressing. But, yeah. So, I personally speculate that the whole movie is not really supposed to be a narrative or something. Everything's imagined. Everything is in the janitor's head. Everything's being imagined by the janitor, and the janitor is most likely Jake. And Jake, the janitor, is also suffering from dementia and Alzheimer's, so he's forgetting the names of people, history, things. He mistook a movie for being a part of his real life at one point. He mistook the girls who looked at him in the hallway of the high school as the girls in Tulsi Town. And he also regrets not taking care of her parents, because he sees them when they're young, he sees them when they're old, almost like he sees them all at the same time, like he's looking at the fourth dimension. And he's just really regretful about all this. And at the end, he just embraced his very sad ending, and sort of attributes to his love for musicals, because apparently, out of all things, musicals are the only thing that he remembers the most, as well as the Tulsi Town theme song or something. And I kind of like the idea. Again, I don't hate slow burns. I've watched a lot of slow burn movies last year because I was rushing myself to see as many good movies of the decade as possible, and movies like Under the Skin, Dogtooth, Melancholia, Inside Llewyn Davis. Yeah, a lot of these movies are super duper slow. Amour, Shame, all of these movies are slow burns, slow to a crazy degree. And same goes for I'm Thinking of Ending Things. But I guess if there are a couple of things I still don't really like about this movie. First of all, on the technical side of things, it's the sound editing and mixing. There are a few scenes where the sounds, they're just very choppy. I don't know if it's intentional or not, but whatever the case may be, it's annoying. But in the later half of the movie, it's better. The second part about this movie that I think needs improvement is the emotional impact. Now, yes, this is a movie about the remaining memories of an old janitor, because there's a lot of guilt and remorse, supposedly, but I just don't feel as much of that. But still, overall, I like the idea of this movie, and it's very thought-provoking. So yeah, for now I'm feeling a strong 7 out of 10. But maybe by the end of this year, this movie will grow on me. But for now, it's a strong 7. Yeah. What are your thoughts on I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Charlie Kaufman? From 1 to 10, how much you rate it? Like it, and subscribe if you want more. And thanks for watching. I will watch The New Mutants very soon, if I can, and review that. Yay!